Hello everyone, this is Jimmy Cultist, back again with another logic video for dreams, and today we're covering the subject of elevators and how to create them, or at least I guess this would be one of the methods, but it's probably the most commonly needed method. So let's get down to business and start with the basics. I have created a sculpt. I will use L1 and X to scope into this group to see the sculpt. First, I have this white sculpt. It's invisible and non-collidable. I've also turned down the luminoise and I've made it glow just a little bit, just to make it easy to see. And I'm using it as a demarcation point to basically tell me how high the elevator has to rise, where it's going to stop. That way, you know, when I'm moving the elevator, I have some sort of guide. I also have one down here at the lower part where the elevator can go down, and that just shows me the limits of the elevator. But basically, those are separate, and I've got an elevator which includes a door, and the elevator is its own separate group with all these things included. Now, of course, it is also grouped with these white things to create a master group, if you will. So, yeah. And I had the door shut originally when I stamped this microchip onto the elevators group using L1 and X. So the door normally wouldn't be open like this. That's why it's just hovering in this, you know, void. But we'll take a look at what we've got in there. First, I've got the keyframe that opens the door, which if you turn it off, you can see the original position of the door. And that keyframe is set to slow power up 1.0 and slow power down 1.0 so that it moves more naturally. And it's got a switch hooked up to its power, which I'll explain how that works later. I've also stamped out a selector to control the different states of the elevator, that being when it's up and that being when it's down. And I have the outputs of the elevator, that being A and B, connected to these microchips, which I've called Operation A and Operation B. And these are basically what allows you to move the elevator via a prompt. The first thing I have is a little tag called Can Use in the center of the elevator. But if you wanted to put little buttons on the side, you'd probably move this over there or something. But the Can Use tag interacts with a trigger zone inside the puppet's logic, which if we press L1 and X, we can open that up and take a look inside at his tags, which are in this microchip. Now the Can Use trigger zone is constantly active. It's a little square in front of him, and this basically shows at what point he can interact with something. And it's set to detect a tag, which of course this is a tag, and it is connected, or at least the output is connected, to this text displayer, which displays a prompt to go down, which is triangle. And here we have the actual use function, which is in the exact same position as the can use function, so they line up pretty, you know, exactly. And you'll see over here that we have the use trigger zone, which is very similar to can use, except for it's only active when we press the triangle button, which if you press L1 and square, you can open up this controller sensor and take triangle and connect it to the power of this node. And that's an easy way to create an interaction method right there. And it's a square, same size as can use, to be as accurate as possible. And use is connected to a node, and the wire from that node leads inside this microchip, which I have labeled moving down. There's the wire, it leads to another node, and I'm sure if you've watched our videos a lot, you're familiar with this setup. A node with a NOT gate connected to the power, L1 and square to open it up and connect the output to the power. And the node is hooked up to a timeline set to play once. On the timeline, there is a switch which leads into the NOT gate, preventing playback. We've seen this quite a few times if you've been watching my videos consistently. But that's pretty much, the setup we're going with. I've also got this action recorder, and what it does, it's set to keyframe mode. I recorded a single frame at the beginning, and this frame shuts off the switch, closing the door while the elevator is working. I've also shut off the selector so that all the operation, anything in here won't be interfered with, like the prompts won't show up, none of that, until it reaches the end of its cycle, which I have controlled the cycle with a keyframe. I have the base position, which is basically right here. I've just grabbed it with R2 and used precise move. I didn't move it at all, I just grabbed it in its local position. And I recorded another keyframe. This can be kind of difficult if you want to, record this because it's moving up and down and it'll take the timeline with it. But as long as you have hide everything on, it should be easier to find it in its relative position. But all I've done is with precise move, I've moved it down to our demarcation point at the bottom. I have a little extra keyframe at the end that goes beyond that point to just kind of, make it settle a little and actually make it feel like a real elevator where you kind of get that brief, like, stopping, lurch. And then I've set a duplicate of this keyframe at the end, and I've set it to keep changes, so the elevator will stay in place. Now once that's done, we have this little switch right here. Once that keyframe is active, this switch will change the output of our selector to B. And you'll notice that my keyframe doesn't go beyond this, because if we had this shut off, we wouldn't be able to change the selection. So it's active as soon as this switch is available to trigger. And inside here we basically have a duplication of the logic from before, the only difference being that it's going to move us up instead of down. And since it's actually on the elevator, you don't have to worry about repositioning these tags. They'll just be in the elevator and move with it. The only difference I can think of between the two is that in the moving up timeline, I decided to put an extra keyframe at the end set to keep changes, because sometimes that's necessary. Not all the time. I'm not really sure what the difference is, but occasionally you'll need that, otherwise it'll do this weird jumpy thing and not work properly. So if you're running into that difficulty, just copy out the keyframe, which is on linear blend, by the way, just in case you were wondering what type of blend I was using. It's my coffee blend. But as long as you have the switches hooked up to the appropriate ports, this should work just fine. And you can add sound effects on the timeline if you want to, like a stopping noise or whatever. You may also notice that I've left this little space at the beginning where it's not doing anything. That's just so the door can close while the action recorder is shutting off the door animation. So let's go ahead and test it out. We'll go in here, the prompt is visible, door shuts, and the elevator is moving down. And the door opens. Now let's go back up in reverse. Now you may be wondering, what would I do if I was down below? Say I start on the first floor and the elevator's up and I need it to come down. It's very simple. All you're going to have to do is duplicate the prompt. And I'll show you how to do that. Just move this down. We are going to have to change the position slightly because you're going to be standing outside the elevator instead of inside. But we're just going to move it down in front of the elevator about here. And we might leave that open just so we have something to show. And we'll move can use down. But basically this just will make it so that when you're down here you can access the ability to make the elevator come down. And vice versa, if you were at the top and the elevator wasn't there, you can duplicate this in the other scenario as well. Like you could duplicate the same process in Operation B. But I'm going to go ahead and test it just to make sure it works properly. I'm going to have to move my character down because currently we have no way of testing. And we'll probably see the elevator coming down. Of course, normally you'd probably have like a door or something that closes, you know, to keep the process hidden. Although certain older elevators, you really could just, you know, see a big wide open gap. Maybe they'd have like a little metal door, like a little metal fence type thing that would close to keep you from falling down the chute. But you could see the operation inside. Anyway, that's pretty much how to make an elevator. Now, there's probably more complex ways, like I want to choose a certain floor, you know, how do I do that and all that. But I figure this is the most simple way, and doing it the complex way would involve this very same system. It just might be more complicated and might require a more in-depth interface. So I hope you found this helpful in whatever endeavors you might be making. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye.